What's going on, everybody? Cheers. Happy Wednesday, and welcome to this week's episode of the With Her Two Hands podcast, where each week we celebrate the women who build, fix, and make the things that make the world go round with her own two hands. I am your host, Bogey, and I am going to be joined by an incredible woman this evening. She is a car restoration expert. She is also a business owner. She is super passionate about not just fixing old cars, but like really preserving the originalness of it, right? Not just replacing things, but really diving into some of the lost skills. She's a student for life. I've always been inspired by how quickly she is willing to dive in and just learn new things. So I think you're really going to enjoy meeting her. But before I bring her on, really quickly, I want to do a big thank you to our partner on this podcast, DriveTime. We are so grateful for their support of this series. They've been a partner since way back when. They're also a partner with us on our charity build over at my shop, Girl Gang Garage. And they just do a ton of work behind the scenes to help bring more women and actually just bring more young people in general into the trades. And we love businesses and companies within the automotive industry who are doing that. It's easy to talk about the skills gap. It's easy to talk about how we need more techs, but to be willing to actually put in the money and the time and the effort to training young folks and give them an opportunity to create a space for themselves in the industry, that's a whole nother story. So we thank them for what they do behind the scenes, and we thank them for supporting this podcast. And if you are not familiar with them, you should go check them out. Their link is down in the bio, so you can go see what they're all about. But the other thing is that I want to thank you guys, because you guys are pretty awesome. And I really appreciate you all who come back week after week to meet these incredible ladies and hear their stories and be inspired by them. Hopefully you get some value out of it and that you enjoy it. Please make sure you leave likes and comments and hit subscribe and spread the good words. The algorithm knows to get these messages and these stories and these women's lives and successes out there for more people to see, so that we can normalize seeing women in the trade, so we can see more women in the trade, so that one day this podcast isn't necessary and we are all just folks working in the trades, and it doesn't matter whether we're male or female. And you guys are part of making that happen. So thank you for being along on the journey to normalize women in the trades. So with that, without further ado, I'm going to bring on tonight's guest, Miss Stephanie Prewett. Hello, darling. How are you?
I'm good. And I'm going to apologize in advance. My dog does not like being outside. And so if you hear that, that's him.
No worries. No worries. You might hear my cats crying because they don't like being outside either. So, or not outside, just outside of my room.
Yeah. Not right next to you.
Not right next to me, getting in front of the camera and all of that. But so anybody who's been watching this for a long time knows that Stephanie was actually a guest before. She was episode number 92, 93, I think. And we got to her episode to release in the archives, and I started editing it, and I was like, oh my God, the audio on this is absolutely awful. I can't share it with the world. You guys would hate me. Therefore, I must have Stephanie back on again so that we can get caught up on all of the old stuff and then all of the new stuff, because it's been a minute. It's been like, what, 2 years, I think?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, kind of crazy. So introduce yourself for the fine folks at home. Where you're from, what's your name is, what you do, and then we'll dive in a little bit.
Okay, well, my name is Stephanie Prewett. I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I own Chrome Fins Restoration with my husband. We opened it November of 2019, so literally right before COVID and everything hit. So that was a rough year.
Yeah, best time to be starting a business.
Yeah. Yeah, we could have gotten a little hint, like.
Nah, that would be too. I always say though, like if you start a business at the worst possible time, then everything else is easy, right? Because I had a similar, like I started my business and then I was 06 and then the real estate market crashed and everything crashed. And we were in this massive recession. And I'm like, okay, well, if I can survive this, I can survive anything.
Yeah, very true. And, like with COVID and everything, it has altered like the manufacturing process and timeline and everything. And so all of our customers are kind of used to like us being like, well, we're not sure when things are going to get here. Uh, we've had to wait years on some things and just a couple of months on some things. And so they've gotten pretty understanding about like it. We just don't know anymore.
Yeah.
So,
I'm going to pause you real quick and have you bring the mic a little closer to your face if you
oh,
could, because
okay.
you're a little in and out. Oh, now you're gone. Uh-oh. Say something to me. Oh, no. We have lost you entirely. Folks at home, stand by. We will get her back. I made her touch her mic and now she's gone. Nope. Still nothing. Okay, let's see. Try wiggling it again. I'm so sorry, folks at home. I don't know what happened. We just lost you. Yeah. Nope. I jinxed it by saying something about how the audio was bad last time. Now we're gonna wind up with bad audio again. Okay. Well, she is messing with that, and if you need to call in help, you're welcome to do that. Yeah, I can't hear you at all. Oh, wait, you're muted. You muted yourself. Hang on. Try
Okay.
saying something now. Oh,
Is,
yes.
are we good?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know what happened. That's
I think
weird.
okay. I think we're okay. Hallelujah. Gotta love technical difficulties. This is when you do live, you get the good and the bad. It is what it
Yeah.
is. I appreciate you guys who hang in through all of our technical difficulties, but that's the fun of doing it live, right?
Yeah.
So so where were we? It's interesting you bring up all these delays with parts and with time and
Mhm.
having started during COVID and people being used to that. I think that's something that a lot of folks don't necessarily even realize, like, that one of the effects
Yeah.
of COVID was and that hasn't gone away, is the supply chain
No.
issues in the automotive industry.
Yeah, just kind of, something I can think of right off the top of my head is sorry, my cat's down here. Um, is so we were looking for a camshaft for my engine, and I kept checking back to see if they had it in stock or anything, and we finally called, and they were like, "Oh, no, it's gonna be, like, a year more."
Oh my gosh.
Like, this was last year when we called, and I think they said that they were still fulfilling orders from, like, 21 or 22.
Oh my goodness.
So, yeah, I was like, "Okay." I'll
That's
wait.
intense. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting thing, and I don't know that it's gonna get better anytime soon, which makes what you're passionate about doing, like, all that much more
Yeah.
important. Like, I think it's really interesting because a lot of folks are really into, myself included, like, kinda that resto mod look where
Yeah.
it's old, but it's made to look new and it's, sleeked out and modified, right?
Yeah.
And you really take a lot of pride in resurrecting kind of these dying arts like lead work and
Yeah.
keeping original and really bringing that back to life. And I think there's gonna be more and more of a need for that when we can't
Mhm.
find stuff and the supply chain is so
Yeah.
disrupted. Where does that passion come from you?
I have no idea. I think it's just like a thing of, well, it's already broken. I can't make it any worse. So if I can fix it and make it look better, why not? You know?
I
And I
love
feel
that.
like if you have an understanding of how something works, then that can go across so many different cars, makes and models and other things in life. And so it's just not being afraid to dive in and understand that it's not going to go exactly how you plan and things are going to happen and you're going to have to adjust your expectations and your plan and everything like that, but you learn so much throughout the whole process that it's worth it. And ideally, you come out of it with something that either looks factory and brand new factory, or it looks slightly improved, but you can't really place your finger on what changed, but it just looks better. So,
I love that, like, it's already broken, I can't make it worse.
yeah,
Why
yeah,
not? That is such a great philosophy, and I I wish more people understood that, right? Because that takes the fear away, right? When
yeah,
you're like, "Okay, how do I fix this? I'm afraid to break it." It's already broke.
yeah,
It's
it's
already
already
broken.
broken. Yeah,
Just
yep,
try.
and sometimes other things break in the process of fixing things, but that is just the nature of old things, old cars, old components,
Yeah,
everything,
you look at them funny
It's
and they fall apart. Yeah,
yeah,
it's just one of the things. Absolutely.
yep,
Okay, so you've always been a dive-in girl. I know this about you. The folks at home don't know this yet. So let's talk a little bit about this because you did not grow up in this industry.
mm-mm.
This was not
No.
your first rodeo as far as careers go, as far as passions go, but you dove in head first because that's just who you are. Tell everybody what you were doing before you became a car restorer.
So, I actually initially, like, way back when, I was going to vet school. I was gonna be either a vet tech or a veterinarian. I really hadn't thought it out completely yet. Discovered that I just really love animals and that being the person that gives the bad news or has to do the hard thing in that regard was not for me.
Yeah.
So I kind of did a little bit of soul searching and asked for some signs, and I got those signs, and they said, "Go get your marketing degree." So I did that. I got my
Okay.
marketing degree I did a double major. So I got my business management side too. And I went into marketing and I worked
Okay.
for a credit union. I worked for a winch company.
Okay.
Yeah, so lots of different things. And then I have always kind of struggled to find my place, like where I feel at home. I mean, I know that like it's work, so like you're not gonna feel at home always, but it just didn't fit. And so I got laid off from my last job and literally walking out of the door, I called my husband and I was like, "Hey, you want to open a restoration shop?" And because we already had customers that were coming to us and saying, "Hey, you used to work at this shop. Can you fix my car?" Because my husband did. He was in the restoration side. He worked for a shop. He
Okay.
did that. And so we had people coming to us saying, "Hey, can you fix this?" And so we already had a lineup of people. And I was like, "Well, we've got a customer base and we just need to find a place." And so we did that. And it's been a lot of learning.
Yes.
So
Was it a thought that had occurred to you before, or was it in that moment that you got laid off that you're like, "What if?" Right? Like,
it it was always kind of that pipe dream kind of thing. Like,
okay.
it would be really cool to do this. Like, it would be cool to own my own business. It would be cool to set my own hours and da 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 da. And it was always the really positive things and never any of the negatives that I thought
Yeah,
of.
of
But
course.
the positives, they end up outweighing the negative quite a bit. So it was it always felt like an unobtainable dream. But in that moment, it was just like, okay, I'm gonna go with my gut and what my gut's telling me.
Awesome. I love this. Okay, so I have to ask because I feel like
Mhm.
every business owner, when they start out, says it would be really cool to make my own hours, be my own boss. So did it work out that way? Do you make your own hours?
Um, Brandon and I, which Brandon's my husband, for those that don't know, um, he he helps keep me on a normal person schedule. If I had my way, we would open at noon and close at, like, 10 p.m. 'Cause I do my best work, like, afternoon, and I've tried to change it over the course of my life, and it's just how I'm wired. But, we meet in the middle, we get to the shop at 9 o'clock. He gives me a little bit of time to wake up and get going, my energy drink, my caffeine. And, inevitably, we usually do end up staying a little bit late because it's just us. And so, like, you got to do what you got to do.
So you do make your own hours. They're just really long ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and there's some weekends where we're at the shop, and that's what comes with owning your own business. And
Totally.
when you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't
And
feel
then
like,
there's the coming
I got to go in
home and working on your books and all of the stuff that isn't done at the
Yeah.
shop, because that happens too, right?
Yeah. Yep.
I always love that, though. It's like this idea, I'm going to make my own hours. I'm going to work for myself. It's going to be amazing. Like,
I'm
no,
going to be my own boss.
you're going to
No,
work
the
twice as
customer.
hard. And now everybody's your boss. Instead of just one
Yeah.
boss, you have like 30 bosses.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. Nobody realizes that.
No, and it's I've learned it's one of those things that's impossible. Like, you can tell people, but they won't hear it until they've experienced it. And then
Yeah.
they'll come back a year or two later and be like, "Oh my God,
Yep.
you were so right."
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
100%.
We just got to learn by experience, because us human beings are stubborn like that.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you'd done some business stuff in school.
Mhm.
So you had a little bit of understanding, but you dive into starting up this business with your husband. Tell me about the early days of Chrome Fins. For those, if I don't know if you've mentioned the name of your shop, Chrome
Yeah.
Fins Restoration.
Yes.
And where are you located?
The shop is actually in Bixby, Oklahoma.
Okay.
So it's like a suburb of Tulsa.
So anybody in that area, you'll need cars restored, you know where to go.
Yes.
So take us back to the early days. You'd just been laid off. You called your husband and said, "What if we start a business?" What were your next steps, and how did you make this happen?
So the first thing that we did is we obviously we needed a place to have a shop. And when you go to somebody that's renting a facility and you tell them, "Yeah, I want to bring a bunch of old cars in here and I want to tear them apart and then, do all this work on them and then paint them," like, they're usually a little bit like, that sounds really messy. And so we had to just find the right place for us and find the right shop within our budget and that had what we needed and an understanding landlord. And we found the place and they've been amazing.
Was
So
it formerly a shop? Was it a property that had been used as a shop previously?
no, it was
Oh.
actually just in like a business complex.
Oh,
And
interesting.
yeah, they have like a ton of different businesses though. Like there's a
Okay.
dog rescue, there's a woodworking place, there's a
Interesting.
like a kids ninja warrior. Like it's all sorts of different things.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so you find a place
Yeah. And you
and call
never
all your
realize
friends
how
and say, bring us your
yeah,
cars."
yeah, exactly. Like we let everyone know, like we didn't make like a formal announcement or anything yet,
Okay.
but like family and friends were like, "Hey, oh, cat, sorry."
That's typical cat. For those of you who are listening in the podcast form, this cat did exactly what all cats do and immediately showed you all its butt.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Anyway, so we, said, "Hey, we're going to need some help moving some existing cars that we were working on, plus toolboxes, tools, all sorts of things." And so we rented a U-Haul and recruited a bunch of people, and they all came through and helped us get moved in. And then another thing you don't think about is an office I have to set up now. So, setting up the office, setting up all of the administrative type stuff. We wanted to get that done pretty quickly. And so like I had to have a vintage desk. I couldn't just get a normal desk. So
Of
we
course not.
found a cool steel vintage desk and painted that and got it nice. And I was happy.
So first we had to restore our office
Yeah.
furniture, and then we
Yeah.
could start restoring cars. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
This all makes
Exactly.
perfect sense. Perfect sense. How did you
But
learn? I mean, you had this business background, but
mhm.
learning how to write out estimates and do all of that stuff, that was a whole new world for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, and so, like I said, Brandon had been in the restoration side. He had been working for a company, and so he had some experience with estimates and
Okay. Yeah.
with cost of things and everything. And even now, I'm really good. Like, if somebody says, "Hey, how much is it going to cost to get a paint job?" I'm usually pretty good about, you know, telling them like, "Well, this is your ballpark, but there are so many caveats." And that has just come with experience, and I love Google. So if I ever have a question about anything or like the best format for like an estimate or a contract or anything like that, like I just go straight to Google. And something that I did learn working for multiple businesses is, especially when you are using another vendor. So I use this, I apply this to my research. You always get 3 reputable sources. And so with like vendors, you get 3 estimates. So with my research, I always find at least 3 sources that are reputable that say the same thing. And so then I know I'm on the right track. So I apply that to like doing estimates, doing contracts, doing the website, like all of it.
Yeah.
And it hasn't failed me yet.
I love that, and I wanna point out because I feel like inherently, whether you knew you were doing this or not, and it sounds like you didn't necessarily, you were just kind of following the path of your life, and it worked out in this way, but I so encourage people who do think they wanna go into business to, in a sense, do what Stephanie and her husband did, which is get a bunch of experience in all of the different things that
Mhm.
you're gonna need experience in to run a business, right? Like,
Yeah.
know how to do research, know how to do admin, and and accounting and
Yeah.
estimating. Like, doing the work is the easiest part
Yeah.
of running the business, right? It's
Yep.
all of the rest of the stuff. And so building up all that experience. So your husband had some estimating experience and he had the car building experience. And then you had some business experience and marketing experience, and all of that could come together and be applied to this business. And that's just
Yeah.
so smart.
Yeah, it's, I attribute a lot of it to my anxiety as well. I'm
Okay.
yeah,
I
I'm
like
always
this.
like, "Okay, well, worst case scenario," and then I work back from there.
How to use anxiety as your secret weapon.
Yes, exactly.
I feel like that's gonna be the name of your book when you write it. You're gonna sell 1,000,000 copies because how many of us
Yeah,
deal with
totally.
anxiety, right? Like, there's a silver lining that it can actually benefit you.
Yeah. Yep.
So, okay, so you had to dive into learning how to run a business. You had to dive into learning the restoration business on the business
Mhm.
end of things. However, you also were not a tradeswoman at the time.
Mm-mm.
And you didn't know the first thing about actually doing the restoration. But Stephanie did not just set back and say, I'm going to do the business side of things. I'll be in the
No.
office while you go fix the cars, honey. No, no. She said, let me get hands on.
Yeah.
What made you go that route and
Um,
motivated you to get out in the shop?
Honestly, it a lot of it is just, I mean, like, this is gonna sound kind of probably cliche or whatever, but, like, I've always admired you, like, always.
Oh God.
And,
Thank you.
um, and there's so many women that I did and I do look up to, and it's like, I never felt at home and at peace in a corporate environment, and a change is what I need, and working on cars and making something new again, or, it it really just fulfilled like, it filled me, like, it filled my bucket, and it's doing the admin is okay, like, it's not something I love, and it never was anything that I loved doing, like, I never was the type of person that would want to sit in an office, and so any job that I had, like, I always enjoyed walking around and, even working outside, like, when I could, like, on a laptop or whatever, like, I never wanted to be in an office. And don't even get me started on having to dress business casual or anything. That was a nightmare. But, just seeing other women do anything automotive or automotive related or, in blue collar jobs, like that's always been something that I admire. And growing up and not having people tell you, "Hey, this is an option." It was eye-opening when I found out that, "Oh, I'm kinda good at this." Like, I somebody should have told me a long time ago.
Do you feel like if you'd been exposed to it when you were younger, that this would have been something you'd pursued earlier on?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there were some times where, like, I did little things, like, on my cars here and there, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoy the you take something broken and then you fix it, and now it works. And I always just really enjoyed that, and even when I would be working on, my brakes or whatever, nobody ever said, "Hey, if you enjoy this, you could do this for a living on not just, daily driver cars, but like classic cars and,
Yeah.
anything basically."
Yeah.
And so, yeah, if somebody had told me that, it would have definitely changed the trajectory. So,
Yeah. I mean, just knowing you and seeing your life and your career over the last several years that I've known you, it's like once you found this missing piece of the puzzle that you didn't know was missing, it was like, "Oh, that's what the picture was supposed to look like. Got it.
yeah. Yeah.
Got it." Yeah.
So,
So you start tinkering a little, you start getting involved, you feel this calling out to it. It's this magic piece of the puzzle that you didn't know was missing. How did you learn? Because there's a lot to learn, and you were starting at ground zero, really.
mhm. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it goes back to I like to read and I like to learn things and, watching other people who know what they're doing do it and learning from that and gaining that knowledge and not being afraid to ask, "Hey, how do I do this?" Or "How do I fix this?" Or "I did this thing and now it's not working at all. So help me." And that has been the biggest thing. I think a lot of our generation and possibly future generations find it really hard to say, "I don't know how to do this. How do I do this?" And, being able to acknowledge that you don't know how to do something is a really powerful thing because you can learn so much from that. And so just diving in and saying, "Okay, how do I do this? Can you teach me?" And also, like, staying up to date on practices and also learning how they used to do things 50 years ago, 60 years ago, and the drawbacks of that or whatever it may be, just really throwing myself into learning. So,
Was that always who you were? Like, just
yeah.
okay. So this is
Yeah.
this is just the new topic that you applied it to, but you were always the learner, the gatherer
Yeah.
of information.
Yeah. I I don't know why I've gravitated towards that. I just if I have a question that's in my head, like, I'll go find the answer.
Yeah.
And, it gives me a lot of random information. Um, so, like but it works out because eventually somebody's gonna need that information.
Okay, so far what I'm gathering from this is that your secret to success is anxiety, a willingness to ask questions,
Mhm.
and the knack for doing research
Yeah,
and gathering data.
yeah.
I like
But
this.
then the
This is a
important thing
great
is
secret to
remembering
success.
that.
Well, yes, there's always that, remembering everything that you learn. Well, that's the
Yeah.
hard part, right?
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Um, amazing. There's so many directions that we could go with this. So you not only decided to learn all of the things and gather all of the information and start honing your skills, but you have really, like we kind of talked about at the beginning of this episode, like talked about you've gravitated towards some of the old techniques
Mhm.
And learning the wise ways of the elders, right? And you talked about how
Yeah,
the younger generation doesn't really know how to ask questions, and then we have this perfect storm, like this. The other side of that coin is that we have an older generation that doesn't always like to teach
exactly.
their
Yeah.
hard-earned secrets, right? And their hard-earned skills. So we got a younger generation who want to ask questions, older generation doesn't want to teach.
Mhm.
And hence we now have a massive deficit of people who know how to build and make things. So
Yeah, and we have people and it's funny that you mentioned that because I'm in a lot of different Facebook groups related to metalworking, auto body, mechanical, like all these different things, and I see people that are my age or younger that are coming and saying, "Hey, I did this thing and it didn't turn out the way I thought. Here was my process. Where did I go wrong?" And I see comments that are, things like, "Well, you're just gonna have to do what I did and figure it out." Or,
oof,
"Yeah." And, things like, "Why don't you go Google it?" And I'm just thinking like, this person has already humbled themselves and come to this group
right.
asking for help. Help them,
'Cause it
you
takes a lot
know?
to do that, right? It does
Yeah.
take a lot. Like, you make it look easy because that's just in your nature to be like, "Hi, I wanna learn new things, teach me. I
Yeah.
don't know what I'm doing, teach me." And that's an amazing natural talent to have, right? But for most human beings, it takes a lot to say that.
Mhm.
Like, as you said,
Yeah.
humble yourself. And it's so frustrating when the older generation is like, "Nope, figure it out."
Yeah, and then you see like, I see so much play out in the Facebook world, like, you see people saying that, but then the flip side of it is you see them saying, "Well, the younger generation doesn't wanna do this profession anymore. They don't wanna restore cars. They don't wanna do metalwork." And it's like, well, I mean, how do you expect them to do these things if you're not wanting to teach, you're not willing to share knowledge? And we've got a workforce that is retiring and leaving those vacancies that need to be filled. So,
Yeah, it's gonna be real interesting over these next, like, several years, maybe decade or so, but I don't
yeah.
think it's honestly gonna take all that long between the, supply chain issues that you were talking about kind of at the beginning of this
Mhm.
with, how long it's taking to get parts and how there's, challenges with getting things and making things, like, there's just so many challenges on that end
Yeah.
of the spectrum, which is gonna get worse,
Mhm.
and then this technician supply chain, which you're so right. It's like this older generation be like, "How come nobody wants to do this? These young kids don't wanna learn." "Oh, you wanna
Yeah,
learn? Go figure it out yourself." Like,
exactly. Yeah.
uh, okay, we have a problem here, Houston. And
Yep.
it's gonna be real interesting because 'cause we're gonna be in a real bad way in not all that long.
Yeah. Yeah, and, it's important that we just preserve what knowledge we have, and, you know, like, one thing that I kinda get made fun of for a little bit is I love, like, old books, and that's been a really great resource, is, like, I got a 1957 Chilton's the other day, and people were like, "Why? Why don't you just go to YouTube?" I'm like, "'Cause this is from that year, like, this is all current information for that year,
Yeah.
and when you have cars come through the shop that people don't make YouTube videos about, this information comes in handy, and it's preserving that sort of knowledge too, and y I hope to one day be able to put that online, but who knows?
Yeah. Well, and it's, can you imagine, like, how effed our world would be if, like, the internet went down?
Oh my gosh. It would be
Like,
so
how
bad.
many people know how to look things up in books anymore,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah,
it's just it's insane. Okay, so we could go down that rabbit hole for, like, a
yeah,
long time, but we're gonna
yeah.
I love that you read, I love that you like old books, it's not nerdy, don't ever let anybody tell you that, it's fantastic, don't lose that. But along those lines, one of the skills that you've pursued and taken up is lead work. And
Mhm.
that is like, talk about a dying art form.
Yeah.
Um, why was this a thing that you pursued? Tell me about it. Tell me a story.
So a lot of it was just I like taking on tasks that people view as too hard or,
Mm,
this generation doesn't do it anymore or, whatever the case may be. And the one thing that I really like about lead work is that it it does go back to the roots basically of customization and hot rodding and everything. And those are the things that we need to keep alive. And if I can help contribute to that, then why not? And I don't know anybody here in Oklahoma. Actually, I know one other person, I think. I take that back, but they're a boy and not a girl. So,
and therefore it
uh,
doesn't count. No, just
yeah,
kidding.
exactly. That doesn't count. But I was just like, I don't know of any girls that are my age that do lead work.
Yeah.
And it it just seemed like a fun thing to try and learn and become good at. And I just was like, "Okay, let's go." And, we had this 35 DeSoto that needed some lead work done, and I was like, "It sounds like it's a good time to start."
Okay. So folks at home, clearly, like she's the type who dives in. If you haven't picked up on this yet,
Yeah.
so okay, I have so many questions about this, but before we dive into my questions, some folks at home may not know what leading is because it is such a dying art form that a
Mhm.
lot of people don't know what it is. To your point, I know one other woman in the country who does it. There's probably others, but I only know of one other. I'm sure there's more. And I really only know, like, I can count on one hand the number of, like, people in general that are, like, doing it and are good at it. So explain to folks, what is lead work? What does that mean?
Okay. The easiest way to explain it is it's using lead, using a soft metal, and when you're applying it, it's liquid basically, instead of a polyester body filler. So you use a metal in place of the polyester. Sorry about my cat.
It's you're fine.
And so you can do all of the same things that you can with body filler. You can shape it, you can, you know, smooth areas out, you can create new shapes, you can do all sorts of things with it. And instead of it being that chemical body filler, it is metal. And it was the old school way of doing things before they had, body
Body
filler
filler.
that was available
Yeah.
like that. So
And so you're heating it so it
mm,
softens, and then you're using special tools to
yeah.
move it while it's hot. And oh, and side note, did you hear that it's lead, y'all? Like, that's, you know, known to be really
Yeah.
bad for us,
Yeah, I
which is why
don't,
it's not out of style, but
I
nonetheless,
make
it's like
sure
a
that's one thing that's really important to me is, like, making sure that I'm wearing gloves, I'm wearing a respirator. I even will change out of the clothes that I do the work in, like, before I go home,
that's
because
smart.
I don't wanna bring that into my house, around my family or anything.
Yeah,
And because like, when you're filing it down and everything, it gets in the air, and it lands
yeah,
on your clothes, it lands on your hair, like, all of that. So
yeah. I mean, there's a reason why it's a dying art form, and
mhm.
yet it's still a really cool art form to make sure it doesn't go away completely, right? Like, I
Yeah,
think that's a really neat thing.
yeah.
So how did you learn that? Excuse me.
How I learned everything, I Googled it. No, but I've always, looked up to Gene Winfield, and he's the GOAT when it comes to that. So I found some of his videos and a couple other metal workers and things, and I watched videos. I read books. I ordered this like starter kit, and that even came with some tips and tricks and things. And there was a lot of like just practicing before I touched a customer car, and making sure that I had the right temperature, I had the right consistency of the lead, because you have to wait till it's like a Play-Doh consistency, and you know making sure that I had the metal clean. Like, there's just so many intricate steps that you have to take before you can start, and just making sure I had a clear understanding of what that looked like.
Yeah. I love it. You need to come to Phoenix and teach a class on it at some point.
That would be fun.
I would love to learn. I think it'd be really cool. Also,
Yeah,
there's
it's
like so many amazing topics for your book when you write it. It's going to be a good one day. Folks, stay tuned. Okay, so you dove in, you discovered this career later in life. You dove in head first. You haven't looked back. You've been cultivating all of these new skills. Um, Talk to me about some of the coolest projects that you've gotten to work on through your shop, and or like the ones you're most proud of.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so we've had this 1935 DeSoto Airflow that's been a study project, basically since I think mid 2020, because it needed a full restoration. It was in rough shape, but we have just we're at the very final steps right now, and so it's really exciting. Um, with the type of car it is, parts are non-existent. They don't remake anything for it. Parts that do exist still are usually in pretty rough shape, and so that has been the biggest. It's been one of the most challenging projects, but also one of the funnest, because I get to learn new things. I get to, you know, take things that people would normally just write off and say, "Oh, you just buy new." Well, you can't buy new with this. So you have to figure it out. You have to fix it and restore it, and you just have to. Like, there's no new. So that's been the funnest, and, we did, like, a V8 swap on it, so it's got a newer drivetrain underneath it with new electronics and everything, and so it's gonna be a really cool car once we're completely wrapped up with it.
Okay. So it's going to look stock, but not
Yeah,
be. Is that the thought?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's gonna look completely stock on the outside. It's gonna have, like, I don't no, they didn't do air conditioning. Had to think about it for a second, but they opted for no air conditioning, which is a brave thing to do. Um, but yeah, it's got the whole new drivetrain, and it's gonna run and drive like a new car, but still be the old car that they love. So,
Amazing. Well, they say necessity is the mother of all invention, right? So, like, you're in a situation where you've got a vehicle that doesn't have a lot of availability, so you have
yeah,
to figure it out. Um, and it's so interesting. Like, I love the way you say it, like that it's been the most frustrating and yet the most satisfying and the funnest.
yeah.
And we're in such an interesting industry, aren't we? Like, it's such a weird world that we live in. We're like while we're in the job, we're like, "This sucks."
Yes. Yes.
And then the
Yep.
minute it's done, we're like,
Yeah, like,
"Oh."
yes!
And it's the best feeling ever. Like, the
It is.
hardest
It
jobs are the
really
best
is.
jobs. Yeah,
Yeah, so
we're
but
gluttons for
and it's
punishment.
yeah. It's funny that, the DeSoto has been a frustrating car, but at the same time, a fun car, and no parts availability. And then, my personal project is the same way.
So what is your personal project?
It is a 1957 Dodge Coronet,
Okay.
and they don't remake anything for it at
Not the most
all.
popular vehicle.
No. No, it's not the most popular, but the amount of people that I see that go, "Oh, that's a really cool car. What is that?"
Yeah.
is really it's fun, because you get to teach people like, oh,
Yeah.
this is what this is. And I inevitably get the, oh, is that Christine? And it's, yeah, which Christine is worse right up there.
Nice.
But yeah, but but yeah, it's a really, positive feeling when you don't have something remade and you can remake it essentially yourself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So do you only work on odd duck vehicles, or like is this
no,
like intentional?
no, it's not intentional. We have some of your like normal run of the mill cars. Like we've got a 67 Corvette that we're working on right now. It's just we're doing some mechanical stuff on it, some suspension stuff, and kind of buttoning up a couple things that weren't done where it was previously. So, and then we've got like a 59 Apache that we're working on.
Okay.
And so, I mean, we've got, like the DeSoto and my car are like the only odd ducks. So,
Okay. The ones that really push your skill set.
yeah, yeah,
What would you say, are you doing like the full like start to finish of restorations? You doing the paint
yeah,
and the everything?
yep.
What is your favorite stage of a restoration?
Okay, so one thing that I really like doing, and it's not this way with every car, but I really like taking them apart. And I like that because not only does it teach you obviously how things go together, but you find things like, I've, taking an interior apart, I've found old racetrack tickets. I found um what else did we find? I found some things that shouldn't have been there.
I mean,
uh
that happens when you work on new cars too,
yeah.
speaking from personal experience.
I found wrenches that have been left in engines. I found, all sorts of different things, and I feel like that kind of lends itself to kind of telling that car's story a little bit,
Yeah.
and envisioning, like, who who owned it when they left this there, and just kind of the story behind it, and I really like that, um, just because it's the start of the story, so,
Yeah. Interesting. I think you've got a little bit of a historian and a researcher in you with the
yeah,
need for the tactile, which is why
yeah,
you've found yourself in the perfect place, right? Like
yeah.
you're in the ideal spot. Okay. Interesting. If you had a dream project other than the two that you've got going on right now, like what is your like, oh my God, I'd love to work on X, Y, and Z vehicle?
Oh, goodness. Oh, there's so many cars that I love. So,
It's okay if you don't have a favorite.
well, I mean, okay, so one of my favorite cars, let me put it this way. My favorite muscle car
Okay.
is the quintessential 1970 Plymouth Barracuda. Um,
Okay. Not what I was
I
expecting you to say, but okay.
oh, um, so I think like if I had the chance to work on one of those, I would jump at that chance
Okay.
for purely selfish reasons because I would probably sit in it the whole time. Um, but yeah, like a Barracuda is one of my top cars.
Okay.
And I mean, honestly, like every car is a car, like it's its own self and it has its own story and its own, uniqueness. And like we had I don't even remember, it was a 72 Corvette that came in for just something small, but it was a 26,000-mile car. And the
Oh, wow.
interior was this beautiful tan color and looked brand new.
Wow.
And, like, Corvettes aren't necessarily my favorite thing, but that car was just so cool to me because it was it was basically brand new still. And, so having opportunities to work on cars like that, where literally everything that is on it is factory. It's from the factory. It was just really cool. So
Interesting. Okay. The historian meets the
mhm.
automotive restoration tech.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so I know a lot of techs and trades folks in general who are like, one day I want to own a business, and it's maybe they're watching this episode and they see, okay, she wanted to do it, and she did it, and she wasn't even a tradesperson. Now she's a tradesperson and a business
Yeah.
owner, and she's successful. And you are like, clearly you've been doing this for a number of years at this point. You've made it past some of those like milestone years
Yeah.
and through COVID and all of the rest of it. Um, but from start to where you're at now, it wasn't a straight line, I'm sure.
No.
Um, wh- how long
No.
was it before you felt like, okay, I think we got this. Like, I think we're gonna be okay.
Um, Obviously, COVID was a huge wrench in everything. And I think honestly, it was probably around 2022
Okay.
when it started feeling like, okay, we're past that big hurdle. Now we're past, the what is like 1 to 2, first years, and we're building up a good customer base where, people we're coming out, across people, in the wild that have heard of us. And, it's feeling like the train is moving steadily down the tracks. And it's owning your own business is just up and down constantly. Like one day you're just on top of everything and you're thinking, I got this. I'm rocking it. And then the next day you're like, who was I even kidding? Like, what am I doing here? And
I do
I
not
think,
got this.
yeah, I do not have this. And I think that that is just part of that's just part of it, and part of also keeping yourself humble and not getting too big for your britches. So,
Yeah. I appreciate that. There's so much about that. I mean, it's business ownership is definitely that roller coaster. But you were
mhm.
approaching your 5-year mark,
Yeah,
which is huge, right? I mean,
yeah,
that is no small feat. They say that 95% of small businesses fail
that's crazy.
before their first 5 years. So when you hit 5 years, like, you are amongst the top 5% of
Ooh.
small businesses. Like, isn't that crazy to think about?
Yeah. Do I get a
Ye
trophy? Who gives me
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, you get to support yourself through your business.
Yeah.
That's your trophy. Do you no, though, do you ever, like, look back or just, get to take a step back and look at the life that you've created and go, "Holy crap." Like,
Yeah.
less than 5 years ago, Stephanie,
Mhm.
you were working an office job.
Yeah.
Oh
Yep.
my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
this is
now look at you.
yeah, this is not something that I ever really I always thought, "Oh, that'd be cool," but it was never like a viable option because it was always just "Oh, that would be neat." But, you know, looking back on it, like, there were lots of times where I doubted myself and I was scared and I was stressed out. I mean, I stay stressed out, let's be real. Um, but, it's been completely worth it, and I honestly like, if I had told the Stephanie of, like, 2018 where I am now, it would have been like, no, you're lying, like, that didn't
Nuh-uh.
happen." Yeah,
Yeah. You should be very proud of yourself, and yes, it is a roller coaster, and it is hard to see sometimes how far you've come. But it's a huge feat to be where you're at. It's pretty cool. That's pretty cool to see and to get to watch.
yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna do this in two parts because we have 5 minutes left, so we might go a few minutes over. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna do this in two parts. My final question, the first half is to somebody who's listening to this and going, "Oh my God, I'm working an office job and I want to do what you're doing, and that sounds amazing."
Mhm.
Um, what are your biggest pieces of advice to them?
Do your research. Um, as if you're looking at opening a business, you really the biggest thing I can push you towards is know your business. Know your what's the word I'm looking for? Industry. Know your industry. Know your industry locally, like in your town. Know your industry statewide, and even maybe some surrounding states, just depending on how big your industry is. And then what do you like that they're doing? What do you think they should not be doing?
Mm.
And what do you want to do? And you find that middle ground of how you want to operate your business. Because at the end of the day, you are your business. I leave the house, I am Chrome Fins Restoration. If somebody Googles my name, that's what comes up. And you have to make sure that the business that you are running, that you are going to be putting out there, is representative of who you want to be. And vice versa. Are you representing your business the way that you want it represented? And then making sure that you have a game plan, have a timeline, have a business plan, and know what your exit strategy is should it not go to plan. And just making sure that you also utilize all of the people that you can as far as resources, like, making sure that you have a somebody that you can go to with, law contract related questions, somebody you can go to with accounting questions, somebody you can go to with industry related questions. And
Yeah.
having that team behind you is going to give you a really good chance of success. And don't be afraid to admit
Amazing.
you don't know something.
Oh my gosh, amazing answers. Golden nuggets right there, folks. Rewind that, listen to it again if you're thinking about starting a business. You have a future in business coaching. These are all of the things that are so important. Like you really hit on it, and it's setting yourself up for success, so that you will be successful and not part of that 95%, right?
Yep.
So, very, very good advice. I love it. We're all just waiting for your book to come out. This is going to be good. All right. So, final question. Final question is: you have the opportunity to go back in time and talk to little baby Stephanie.
Mhm.
What are your words of advice to her?
Honestly, I'm a firm believer in everything happens for a reason. And as much as many things I've lived through that I would change, I don't know if I want to change them. And so honestly, um, if I were talking to, like 4 or 5-year-old me even, I would, just say, you're smart, you are amazing, and you keep doing what you want to do. You keep on that path and trust yourself. And, you know, because if I changed anything, then maybe I wouldn't end up here. So,
Truth. And here is a great place. You've found
yeah.
yourself a great place. And I guess much like our industry, our career, we talked about how it's like when you're in it, it's like, "Ugh, this is the worst thing ever." And then when you get to the end of it, you're like, "Oh my God, this is absolutely amazing." Like life is kind of like that. Like when you're
Yeah.
in the lows, it's like, this was the stupidest idea
Mhm.
ever. Why did I do this? Everything sucks. And then when you get to the other side of that mountain, you're like, oh, all those things had
Yeah.
to happen to get to
Yep.
this amazing place. So
Yeah.
I love it. Wonderful words of advice. Tons of golden nuggets throughout this. You are phenomenal.
Thank you.
I
As are
know.
you.
Oh, thank you, my dear. We have just scratched the surface on your story. So, folks at home, make sure you go follow her and follow her shop and check them out. And keep up on all their crazy projects. And, so it's only up from here. She's only 4.5, almost 5 years in. And it's just going to keep growing. So make sure you give her a follow and stay along for the ride. Thank you so much for saying yes to doing this again, Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm so bummed that the first one wasn't preservable, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to let you
Yeah.
go. And folks at home, thank you guys so very much for spending part of your evening with us. I hope you enjoyed meeting Stephanie as much as well. I didn't just meet her. I've known her, but getting to know a little more about her story. Definitely make sure that you go follow her. Make sure you leave comments, hit like, hit subscribe. It tells the algorithm to go spread her story to the people who need to hear it, because there are people who need to hear it, right? There's another little girl
Yeah.
out there or a tradesperson who wants to start their own business who needs to hear this story and be inspired by her. So make sure you interact with this. And definitely go make sure you check out our sponsor for this episode, DriveTime. They do a ton of work behind the scenes. They really do to train new folks and get them into the industry. Like Stephanie and I were talking about earlier on, like there's this gap and it needs to be filled. And they're doing what needs to be done to make that happen. So give them some love as well. And make sure you come back next week because we have another awesome tradeswoman to meet. And every Monday you get to see an archive episode. And with that, I'm going to quit blabbing until next week. Be good to yourselves. Be good to one another. Just be a good human being. And we will see you next week. Bye, guys.